This is the Realty Classroom Podcast, episode number 169. Why most agents never turn pro. Are you a real estate agent with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to turn your job into a business without sacrificing your lifestyle, but you just can't seem to find the right plan or any plan to help you get there? Well, then, hey, you know you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom and the host of this podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, I've created a free strategic plan for you that's waiting at freeagentgift.com. I'm telling you, I wish I had this thing in my hands when I first started long ago, so that I at least had a structure and a model that I could follow as I learned the microeconomics of the macroeconomic business, okay? I know it sounded a little funky, but freeagentgift.com. Get over there, get a copy of it. It's free. It will help you. The subject today, why most agents turn pro. The first point is because of the resistance. So many thanks to Stephen Pressfield, who wrote a couple of, I think he's a multiple book writer, but a couple of fabulous books. The first one that I stumbled into was called The War of Art. But the second one that I just finished listening to is Turning Pro. And in the first one, Stephen talks about this sense of resistance. In his case, The War of Art was he personifies this internal resistance that kept him from being a writer. He knew he wanted to be a writer, but he had this shadow career he talks about where he decided he wanted to be this truck driver. And all along, this copywriting, this concept of, writing was bugging him, and he kept trying to become that thing, and there was this resistance, and he would fight against it, and eventually he would become a writer, and a very good one. So I highly recommend you get both books, but start with today's subject, Turning Pro. And if you need references to when he refers to the resistance, that's in The War of Art. Both fabulous listen-tos or reads, however you want to consume them. But that's why most real estate agents never turn pro, because there is this internal resistance that is absolutely waiting for us. I say to my clients, look, I have come to realize that no matter what, whether it's my business, my family life, my health, whatever it is that I want to do, because I have this self-image in a certain way that I want to live, the resistance waits for me. While I sleep, it waits for me at the end of the bed. And when I open my eyes, there it is waiting for me, waiting to resist me and prevent me from doing the right thing to get what I want. That's what it is. Now, this will branch off into a lot of other conversations too about procrastination, but the resistance is a very, very powerful force. Why don't more real estate agents do better? Especially because a lot of people know how to do better. They've been exposed to plenty of training at their brokerage. Online these days, you get plenty of training, at least some ideas, and you could do better. So why don't you do better? Because there's a strange resistance. You see, in our business, there are plenty of things that you could do that are pretty easy to get in front of clients. Everybody leads. Well, just do an open house. Borrow an open house from a fellow broker or the brokerage, sit in it, and have some conversations. Even if you didn't have a system yet on how to handle an open house, somebody's going to come and you're going to have some conversations. I mean, if you can't do simple things like that, man, the resistance has you by the neck in this business. So there are things you can do to fight back very quickly like that. But this podcast today is more about understanding why this is even happening to us. So I've gotten into this subject, and as you know, if you listen to the podcast in the past, the head stuff has always been something that is personal to me, and I'm always helping my clients. I mean, at the highest level, top producers, it's primarily about the head stuff. I mean, I've been putting together a systematic approach for a very long time. Previously mentored in looking at things systematically for almost now 9 full years, beating on my own system and how I do things. And there are people that have been with me for all that time. And yet their resistance, even though they're co-creating a lot of the systematic approach, they don't even execute the plan. So why? It's one thing to recognize this and you beat yourself up. Well, I'm going to do my, incantations and I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to jump up and down and change my state. And I love Tony Robbins and all that stuff. And I think it matters, but not if there's not a plan to execute once you get yourself changed. Once you're all fired up and ready to go, what's your plan? What's your plan? You need a plan to execute. So in absence of a plan, here's the second point. The animal brain is reasonable, okay? I want you to understand that. So here you are as a real estate agent without a plan, and your animal brain says, well, if you're going to make a living in real estate, then we've got to eat. See, your animal brain, your lower level thinking brain, just says you need to survive. So you need to go out and do something to make money, to put food on the table, roof over your head, and perhaps, clothing and a car to get around if that's the case. Money, you need those things, says the animal brain. That's reasonable, right? See, oftentimes we want to deride the animal brain. We want to put it down and we want to say, oh, it keeps me from doing all these great things and thriving. Yes, but it's because it's meant to help you survive. That's its basic premise. So it's actually reasonable to understand that. In my other podcast, the bonus section, I talk a lot about trying to break away from the animal brain, but not until you embrace it in this case. Because it's a reasonable premise. And this really relates to top producers. A lot of you want to become a top producer. Be careful what you wish for. Those people are such good hunters. Their animal brain is typically so good, and they've learned how to hunt, and they're very prolific. And most top producers can really get themselves on muscle in maybe some systems and some people to help them. They can get to 3 to 5 deals a month. And that's a lot. But top producers that I coach will bemoan to me, oh my gosh, I've been stuck at 40 deals. Yeah, that's about where the capacity runs out. 36 to 48 deals a year, you begin to run out of capacity without something more complicated than just your animal brain accelerating. I mean, some top producers have grown into this concept of team. They're just spending their way to buy more to hunt, and they're buying the people to help them hunt. But it's still chaos. And it's expensive that way. And it's animal brain driven. It's not strategic. It's not a higher level thinking. It's just brute force. I know. I've been one of those people. I've trained hundreds of those people. And it's broken. Now, I know you might be sitting here going, oh my gosh, I'd love to have the problem of doing $1 million to $2 million. No, you wouldn't. I've known single agents that as they began to hunt, they did themselves really well by saying, I can remember, Anida coming to me with, I think an income statement showing me $120,000 gross. This is way back in the day. Now she's much more than that. She had kept 90 of it. I know top producers that do $1 million that don't keep 90 of it because they're so out of control hunting that they're wasting and expending all this. So there's the whole premise of this podcast. That's not professional, folks. That's amateur hour. So when you see somebody who might be great, but they're spastic, okay, so they're winning, you think, but they're exhausting themselves. They're exhausting themselves. And most of those people either burn out completely, they collapse, they're miserable, they're yelling and screaming. I know, I coach a few of these people that are still so addicted to running and growing things in an amateurish, animalistic way, they're miserable. And I'm not. Because I stopped doing that and at one point in time decided to go pro. About 9 years ago, even though I thought I was pro up until then, because I had systems, I had an understanding of strategy. I'd been around and I'd been birthed into small business through big business. I knew systems and organization and strategic thinking. I knew. But that didn't stop me from behaving a certain way because the resistance to do the homework, right? The resistance to do the homework to learn how to systematize something, to learn how to go from that technical animal brain up into strategic, which requires more work, was a problem. You know why? The animal brain sees you doing something like that. See, the animal brain is helping you survive, but it sees you beginning to do some homework, beginning to learn something, beginning to spend some time away from hunting. And it screams at you. What are you doing? Shut down. That's a huge waste of calories. You need those calories to go find the next buyer and sell them a house. You need those calories to go find the next seller. What are you doing? Stop studying. Very real, right? This is very real. So that manifests itself in what we call procrastination. But is it really? Isn't it just survival taking over? Isn't it the animal brain saying, oh my gosh, because it's so easy to resist. The animal brain personifies itself as that resistance, and it's easy for the animal brain to win. Because when you sit down to do homework, it's a sharp stick in the eye. It's painful. It's work. It makes you sweat. It makes you think. And because you're early in the process of doing that homework to become a better manager, to become a strategic thinker, it shuts you down. It makes you tired. You get overwhelmed. You say things like, I quit. That's a really scary couple of words together. I quit. Forget that. And worse, maybe you quit the whole business and then you go on to the next thing. And what? You're an amateur in the next thing. And you face the same thing all over again. Well, I used to sell property, but now I'm a mortgage broker. And okay, great. Did you like it better? What was the difference? Oh, it's so much easier. It is? Really? Your animal brain got you to think it was so much easier to get loans and it's the same thing? Are you going to turn pro in that? And if you are you going to study and become strategic and manage? See, it's a trap. So what do? Well, the third point is you have to prove to your animal it's easy. See, when the animal sees, like the animal's going to reserve everything, all its energy to go and kill and eat. Think about the lion. Lion lying down all day long on the ground until all of a sudden it's time to hunt and eat. And all of a sudden it's explosive. It's powerful. It can do anything. But then the rest of the day, you're sitting there. You ever go to a zoo and you're dying for the lion to attack something? You want to see action and they're just laying down? Well, there you go. There you are, just laying down instead of getting strategic. So the point is, what if you could prove to your animal it's easy? So you'd have to fight the resistance a little bit. It's going to be work. And you're going to say, shh, quiet down, animal brain. I'm going to try to take us pro. I'm going to prove to you, without bothering me, let me get over here. Let me do a little bit of studying. Let me do a little bit of new implementation. And let me put a system in place. Let me at least say that when we go out and hunt, meaning I go to the next listing presentation, let me be a little bit more organized. Let me ask better questions in a systematic intake form. Let me show up, ask for a strategic walkthrough. Let me sit down. Let me go through a 7-point plan. Let me do my analysis in a net sheet. Let me see how that works. Let me see if that saves calories, because instead of doing a listing presentation that takes 2 hours, it's 45 minutes. That's a real thing for this former animal right here. Exactly what happened. And now the animal in me that wants to hunt says, don't you dare ever go out there and hunt like that again. See what I mean? I proved to the inner hunter in me that 2 hours is a colossal waste and makes us hungry. It does not get what we thought it once did. It wastes time. So I begin to educate my animal that if we want to thrive, if we want to go beyond and we want to burn the least amount of calories, we've got to be strategic. So I have to continue to prove to that person on the inside. Now, of course, there are snapback effects, but I will tell you there's a tipping point in here somewhere when you go pro. Because when you go pro, there's a balance between the time that you spend strategizing, managing, and thriving in a strategic approach. And then when you allow that animal out, it's more effective. And it loves it. It loves you for it. It's just that moment in time when you're beginning to try to go pro. You can't break through because you just keep shutting down, that you're going to have to sweat and break through it all. Let me make this case, though, too. So in all of this work that we were doing in the mastermind, I'll repeat, Stephen Pressfield's books were just so clarifying. I've been a huge fan of Maxwell Maltz's work, The New Psycho-Cybernetics, because that would help see the goal and then realize that you're going to get blown off course and keep going. But Pressfield really personified the resistance, which made me question, well, what is the resistance? And that's where I attached it to the animal brain, which is reasonable. Resistance is there for a reasonable, a reason, right? It's just reasonable that this thing wants to resist to save calories and to set the thermostat just at survival. But here's the problem, the last point here. You must beware the loss of self-actualization. Go look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the very top, the pinnacle, is self-actualization, the living out of who you were truly meant to be, your greatest self. And if you want to Google a TED Talk by Tim Urban, it's just fantastic. It's funny, it's pithy, but it's serious in the end. The saddest part of all of this is that if we just leave the thermostat as real estate agents trying to go pro, trying to turn it into a business, trying to have it serve us so that we can serve more people and help them with the single largest financial and emotional transaction, when that goes right, we're fulfilled. But if we do it few times and it always seems like a sweat, we never really get there to self-actualization as a real professional, as somebody who turned it into something special, somebody who conquered this stuck point. And in Tim Urban's discussion about procrastination, he concludes that we are all procrastinators, that there is no such thing as somebody who doesn't do it. But like I'm trying to do here, he makes you self-aware that in you is the instant gratification monkey, aka the hunter, the lion, the animal who just wants to get fed and have some fun and burn the least amount of calories. See, when you procrastinate, it's fun. It doesn't burn a lot of calories. You relax. You giggle. It's silly. It's fun. Now, there's certainly a time for all of that. But the worst part is tick, 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 tick. That's your life's clock, ticking down. And there are only so many weeks in your life. And the worst part is, if you keep defaulting to thermostatic behavior, which means you just barely survive, you never really get the chance at self-actualization. You never really get to build a business and help people. You never really go pro. And that's a pretty painful thought to think about at the end of putting your effort in this business or anything else for that matter, that you just have this sense of loss, that you didn't win. And that's why this subject is so unbelievably critical. You must learn how to go pro. Otherwise, you might end up at the end of the road with a lot of regret. All right, let me summarize it this way. Subject today is why most agents never turn pro. It's because, point one, of the resistance. Read Stephen Pressfield's book or listen to it, Turning Pro. Excellent. If you want the backup to that one, where some of that concept of personification of resistance comes from, listen to his book, War of Art. Second point, the reason the resistance even exists is because the animal brain is reasonable. So the animal brain inside you is going to resist to save calories, so you do just enough to survive as long as you can. That's all it knows. It doesn't know thriving. It knows surviving. The next point is, so you have to prove to that animal brain that there's an easier way that's even less calories, but it's going to take them, that animal brain, to be quiet while you do a little homework, get structured, and manage better. And ultimately, this all matters because you better beware that if you don't turn pro and you don't move in this direction and control your inner animal, you'll never get to self-actualization and you'll never balance this all out. Let me summarize it this way. Most agents never turn into a professional and maintain an amateur approach because they never take the time to study how a systematic approach to business always trumps doing business on animal muscle. You must become aware that your inner animal brain is resisting you doing any homework because it does not believe that's the easiest path to survival. Therefore, you must quiet the animal and prove that systems actually make it easier to survive. And by default, you begin to turn pro and thrive and ultimately self-actualize. All right. Remember, you can take immediate action to get started in this sort of a direction with a copy of our free agent plan that's waiting for you at freeagentgift.com. Also, don't forget, of course, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. We'd love to hear from you, so don't be afraid to comment so we know what you're challenged by. But remember this, while we do appreciate you listening, we say this all the time, at the close. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So go get to work on your business and a plan to make it successful. And we will see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again.